Hello and welcome back to my channel, All the Stories. Today I will be doing my December wrap up. So I'll be talking about the 9 books that I read in December. The first books that I read in December I'm going to talk about together because they are books 2 and 3 in a series, and that is Hot and Wildfire by Ileana Andrews, which is books 2 and 3 in the Hidden Legacies series. This series follows Nevada Baylor and Mad Seth Rogen. Wow, Connor Mad Rogan, and it's a paranormal romance story. Like I said, this is books 2 and 3, but it follows our main characters Nevada and Connor. Nevada is a PI. She is, and in this world, it's not a regular world, but in the world there is magic, and there are different levels of magic users. The highest level of magic users are primes. They are the most powerful, but then you have like average, sufficient, whatever, etc., etc. And Nevada is, she doesn't have, or she has a rare magical ability, but she is not that powerful. She is like ranked low, and she is a truth seeker, I believe is what it's called. She can tell when someone is lying to her or not, and she is kind of hidden this ability, but she is a private investigator, so that ability serves her well in her job, and she ends up taking this case for to apprehend and bring into custody this guy because he has gone off the rails and his family wants him back. So she takes this case, and this case is a lot more than she bargained for. So when Mad Seth Rogen, why do I keep calling this man Seth Rogen? So when Connor, who is also known as Mad Rogan, comes in and he's also trying to find the same person, they decide to team up to apprehend this person. And that's what the first book's about, but it also follows more in the books 2 and 3. But overall, I really enjoyed this series. The first 3 books are technically kind of one little unit, and then books 4, 5, and eventually 6 follow Nevada's little sister, who is introduced in here, but she obviously isn't a main character. Her name is Catalina, I believe. I really enjoyed the series. I think I gave both of these 4 stars. They were really good. I really liked the romance. It was very slow burn in the first book and then really picked up in the second book. And I really enjoyed the series. I enjoyed Nevada and Rogan as characters. I enjoyed the plot. It was very fast paced, and it was just a fun read overall. So next I finished one of the books that I started a long time ago, and that was Of Curses and Kisses by Sonia Menden. This is a middle grade kind of contemporary novel. It is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and it takes place in this boarding school where our main character Jayla Rao, and it is a princess in India, and she goes to this kind of boarding school for the children of royalty and nobility. And there she meets her kind of arch nemesis, who is, what was his name? Gray Emerson. So Gray and Jaya's family have been enemies for years, ever since Gray's family stole this rare ruby from Jaya's family and never gave it back. So the Emersons and the Rows have been feuding for centuries, or maybe not centuries, for a long time though, decades at least. And they are now at the same boarding school, and Jaya hates Emerson because she believes he has done something very mean to her. She believes he leaked a story about her younger sister to the press, and she has planned to get revenge on him by making him fall in love with her and then breaking his heart. And yeah, and Gray also believes the Rao family has cursed him. He believes he is cursed to die when he turns 18, because of the curse the family put on him after his family stole the ruby. So I ended up giving this 3 stars. It may even be like a 2.5. I didn't particularly enjoy it. There was nothing particularly special about it, which I was very sad about because I really like Sonia Menden's contemporary stories, which are all YA contemporary romances, but I didn't actually like the romance between Jaya and Gray. I didn't care about it. And since I didn't care about the romance, I didn't care about the book because that was the whole plot of the book. I did like the boarding school setting, and I liked some of the side characters, but overall I just didn't have anything very memorable or that I liked, enough to rate this book higher. It was just meh. It was meh. More like a 2.5 actually, if I'm being honest. The next book was very much not meh, and that was Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. Yeah, Dion. This is a YA fantasy, and it was amazing. It is one of my favorite books of 2020. If you saw my top 10 books, So if you want to see more about my thoughts about this, you can watch my top 10 books of 2020. This was number 2 on my list, and for good reason. It was amazing. It is a YA fantasy following the main character Bree, and Bree has recently lost her mother. She is 16. Her mother has recently died in a car crash, and before her mother died, she had applied to the early admissions program in UNC Chapel Hill because that was the school her mother went to, and it was always a dream of hers to go there. So she got accepted right before her mother died, and her mother really just didn't want her to go. So after her mother dies, Bree decides to go to get a change of scenery, to get out of her small town and the memories of her mother that are haunting her there. And when she gets to UNC, she finds out that there's this secret society, and the secret society are, or claim to be, the descendants of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. So Bree kind of gets sucked into the secret society when she realizes that it may have something to do with the death of her mother. So she wants to find out more about what happened to her mother. So to do that, she has to infiltrate the society as one of its new initiates. And it was just so good. I loved Bree as a character. She was an amazing character, and then I liked the plot, and it was just very good, very action filled, had lots of twists and turns. I really loved the magic system that was introduced, both the Arthurian magic and the root magic. The root magic was my favorite part of the story, and all the history and culture and the Black history that was included in the story was very, and the Black perspective that was included in the story was very well done. And I cannot wait for book 2 because the ending of book 1, it was kind of what I expected it to be, but not really. I expected the plot twist, but not quite in the way that it occurred. So I'm really excited about this. I can't wait for the second book, and I highly recommend you try this if it was on your radar, or even if it wasn't on your radar and this sounds interesting, I highly recommend you pick this up. So after reading Legend More, I got into kind of a slump, and I ended up just doing some rereads because when I get in a slump, I like to reread books or just read romance. So I ended up rereading some books because I was trying to anticipate the next book coming out. So the rereads were A Court of Thorns and Roses and A Court of Mist and Fury. I reread these 2 books because the 4th book in the series, A Court of Silver Flames, is supposed to come out in February, so I wanted to reread the series before that book came out. So I just decided to go ahead and start my reread now since I was in a kind of a slump anyways, and I knew these books would cheer me up. So I read the first 2, and I stand by my ratings. This one I always have rated a 4-star, and this one is a 5-star, and I stick by those. It's still a very enjoyable series. Book 2, A Court of Mist and Fury, is one of my favorite books of all time, and I cannot wait for A Court of Silver Flames. If you do not know what the A Court of Thorns, I'm gonna put this down. I took the dust jacket off, the slipcase off, because I really love this collector's edition of the book. It is stunning. But if you do not know what the A Court of Thorns and Roses series is about, it follows our main character Feyre, who is a human girl, and in this world there are human and there are Fae. And the humans live below this. There's a wall that separates the human lands from the Fae lands. So Feyre is a human girl. She's living here, and she ends up killing a Fae who has passed the border and was shapeshifted into a wolf. She ends up killing the wolf. He turns out to be a Fae, and she has to go live beyond the wall as kind of punishment for killing this Fae sentry. And there she must live on the estate of Tamlin, who is the High Lord of the Spring Court, and just live out her days there. But she ends up developing feelings for Tamlin, and then there's also a curse on the Spring Court that she really doesn't really know much about, but she ends up getting entangled into breaking this curse in some kind of way. And this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, if you cannot tell by that synopsis. A very loose Beauty and the Beast retelling, or at least the first book is a very loose Beauty and the Beast retelling. And it was very good. I didn't particularly love the first book when I first read it. I gave it 4 stars. It's actually more of a 3.5, but it serves its purpose, which is why I give it a 4 stars, because once you read the next 2 books, you realize this book didn't need to do, which is why I give it 4 stars. But at first, it was like a 3-star, and still kind of a 3-star if you read it by itself, but okay. But still, that's not where this series, this is not, don't base your whole assumptions on the series by reading this book, because I was one of those people. I read this first book years ago, and then I just never read the second book because I was like, oh, that was okay. But the ending of this book kind of gives you, like some books where you can stop after the first book and it feels like, okay, that's enough. It ends in a way where you could stop it and be satisfied, But if you were one of those people like, oh, this was okay, but I don't think I'm going to continue, read book 2. Read book 2, because I read book 2. It took me a couple years, but then I ended up finding book 2, as you can see on the back. I got it on sale. I ended up finding it on sale at Books A Million. I was like, you know what, I read that first book, I'm gonna try the second book, you know? And I read it and loved it. This is by far my favorite book in the series. It's by far my favorite Sarah J Maas book in general, and I cannot rave about this book enough. I don't have to, because everyone in book 2 raves about this book because it deserves all the hype, because it's amazing. So, according to Miss Fury is where it's at. The next book I read was another reread because I was just in a rereading mood, like I said, and that was Radiance by Grace Draven. I can't think of it, but I'll put a picture here. But this was a book I read earlier this year, and it is a paranormal kind of fantasy romance, and this is also kind of a loose Beauty and the Beast retelling, slightly, a little. And I don't know, that wasn't on purpose, but I reread this because I really enjoyed it and I just wanted something to lift my mood, so I reread Radiance. It did what it had to do. Again, it was 5 stars. I really love this book. It is again, kind of like a fantasy romance story following our main character, Aiko. I think that's how you say her name. And our main male character is Brishan. And Aiko and Brishan are in an arranged marriage, and they're from 2 different species. Brishan is I can't think of what his species is called at the moment, but they have claws and gray skin and glowing yellow eyes. They're not very attractive looking to humans, but again, vice versa, they don't find humans very attractive either. But Brishan is the second son of the king, so he is a prince, but he is not inheriting anything, and Aiko is the niece of the human king. So they form kind of like a little political alliance, and to seal this alliance, Brishan and Aiko get married, and so Aiko ends up going to live with Brishan's people, and they end up having this very cute friends to lovers romance. It was never enemies to lovers. They have this very cute mutual respect and friendship, and that develops into more, and it was very cute, very wholesome, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, I reread it, and it was still another 5-star read yet again. And the next book that I read was Twice in a Blue Moon by Christina Lauren. I ended up giving this 3 stars. Christina Lauren, I really liked the first book I read by them, which was The Unhoneymooners, but both the second and the third book I read by them, which were My Favorite Half Night Stand and now Twice in a Blue Moon, were very disappointing. I didn't particularly like them. This was actually like a 2.5. I rounded it up to 3 on Goodreads, but I think I would stick by a 2.5. I just didn't really care about the characters and the romance, which is, again, the main point of this book is a romance novel. So the fact that I don't care about the romance, it was okay. It wasn't anything special. And it was like a second chance romance type story. They met when they were younger. She was 18, he was 20, 21 when they first met, and they met on vacation. They were both in France, I believe, and they spent their vacation together, and then he ended up betraying her, and she ended up not speaking to him again until they're both adults, and they're like 40, I believe, in the present day storyline, and she is now a famous actress, and she ends up working on this movie, and he actually ends up being on set for the movie, and she has to interact with him, and they rekindle their romance, and it was meh, it was boring. I didn't care particularly one way or the other. I listened to this on audiobook, and if I was reading it physically, and I ended up listening to this over the course of one day. If I was reading it physically, it would have took me much longer to drag through this book. So Christina Lauren is they've been very hit or miss with me. So my last book of 2020, the last book I read in December, was another one of my books that ended up on my favorite list of the year. Same thing that happened last year. I don't know what it is about the last book that I read in the year, but both this year, both in 2020 and 2019, my last book of the year was on my favorites list, and it was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This was so good, so whimsical, just like everyone said. It was very hyped, and I finally read it, and it lived up to the hype for me. I loved this. This follows her main character, Addie LaRue, who has been alive for 300 years. She was born in France back in like the 1700s, and she had a very unremarkable life. She didn't really want to be married. She didn't want to be tied to anyone. She didn't want to live and die in this town. She felt like her life was just passing her by. So one day she is forced into this arranged marriage that she doesn't want. So the day that she is supposed to get married, she runs out into the woods and makes a deal with this. She's been told not to make deals with the gods that answer after dark, and she accidentally makes a deal with one of these dark gods, and he ends up giving her immortality to live. She is forever 27, I believe, is how old she was when she makes this deal. So she is forever 27, young, not, aging, not dying, not getting sick. However, he has also cursed her in this way because no matter what no one can remember her. No matter who she meets, if she talks to them, they can talk to her for hours, day, and they'll spend the whole day with her. But no matter what, if they fall asleep or if they go out of the room and close the door and come back, they instantly forget her. So she has lived 300 years with not one person remembering her until she is in present day, or 2014 is when the present day storyline takes place, and she is in 2014 New York when she meets a boy named Henry, and he works at this bookstore, and she goes back the next day, and Henry surprisingly has remembered her. And so that is what we're kind of following. We're following the present storyline with her and Henry, and then the past also, where we're learning about the past 300 years of Addie's life. But this story was just amazing and magical, and it was just so good, so well crafted, and I just really enjoyed it from start to finish. I highly recommend this book. V. Swab did her thing with it, and I just loved it so much. So that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!